Hello, I'm Colleen Gallagher, CEO at OnWrd UpWrd, and you're listening to the Association Insights podcast powered by OnWrd UpWrd, where each week we interview association leaders from across the country to hear how they're trying new things, taking big risks, and delivering value for their members. We'll explore the realities of what it means to work in and with associations and bring you the insights and inspiration you need to advance your career and make big changes at your association. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Association Insights podcast powered by OnWrd UpWrd. I'm your host, Colleen Gallagher, and today I'm really excited to welcome Stuart Broadley, CEO of EIC, the Energy Industries Council. Stuart has led the organization since 2016, overseeing one of the world's largest trade associations for the energy supply chain, representing more than 950 member companies across more than 120 countries. Under his leadership, EIC has expanded its global footprint, strengthened its market intelligence capabilities, and become a leading voice supporting companies across the full energy ecosystem. Today, we're talking about what it takes to lead a truly global trade association, how organizations can continue delivering meaningful member value in rapidly changing industries, and leadership lessons that Stuart has learned from helping companies navigate disruption and growth. Stuart, welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you on with us.
Hi, Colleen. Yeah, lovely to see you. What a lovely introduction. I'm not sure I can live up to that introduction, but anyway, it's really nice to see you. And I'm calling from Aberdeen in Scotland.
Well, we're happy to have you coming in from so far away with us here today. And to kick us off, I'd love if you could introduce EIC for our listeners, tell me about the mission, who your members are, and what role you really play in a very rapidly evolving industry.
EIC is the UK's largest energy trade association, and in energy supply chain terms is the fifth largest in the world. Our job is to help companies in the energy supply chain. So that's any energy sector. So we're energy agnostic, so oil and gas and renewables and nuclear and carbon capture and hydrogen, geothermal, even fusion. If you're in the energy space and you're in the supply chain, our job is to help you learn about the markets around the world and hopefully win more business. And we've been doing that since 1943.
Wow, I'd say that's a long time. So you say energy agnostic, and I think that's a fascinating philosophy. At a time when so many conversations focus on, one energy source versus another, why has it been important for you to support the entire energy ecosystem?
It's true, isn't it, that organizations today are thinking about should they now be energy agnostic? Perhaps they've been, very recently only oil and gas or only nuclear and the like. Now we need to be broader. For us, it was the opposite, right? So we've always been agnostic, at least for the last 40 years. The reason is because in the UK, there's been a very broad approach to different energy technologies trying to either grow the economy or decarbonize the economy. And so for us who work in the supply chain, which is largely integrated and works across all energy sectors, for us to say we won't do nuclear or we won't do renewable was like us saying we won't help our members. So it became an obvious thing for us. And I think that's maybe what really makes us pretty unusual is that not that we're agnostic, but that we work to support really only the supply chain companies. And I think a lot of trade associations, let's say an oil and gas one, and they would work mainly with the operators and the supply chain. Or you might have a regional one, and that would often also be kind of the regulators, policymakers, operators, and the supply chain for that region. For us, we don't think like that. It's just supply chain. That's all we do. And so hence it has to be agnostic.
Okay, that makes sense. And what resonates with me is every successful association I hear from, everything they do comes back to their mission. And that's it right there. You thought, what is our mission? And that led to who you serve. So I love hearing that. As a communicator, I also love research and data and having numbers to back things up. So one thing that really stood out to me is how much you invest in proprietary market intelligence, reports, data, you name it. So I'd love to know, in your experience, how this role of an association has evolved from connecting members to really becoming this trusted source of business intelligence.
Yeah, so one of the things we do is we call ourselves the voice of the energy supply chain, which means we advocate for our members. And when you advocate, of course, you've got to decide, are you advocating with emotion and hyperbole, or are you advocating with data? Data is much more powerful. It's evidence, and it's hard to question it, but it's much harder to get. It means you can only advocate once you're confident the data's right. And that's our basis. Okay. So when we're arguing that a supply chain, it could be healthier if they had certain things go their way, we always start with the data. So hence, although we will partner with others to bring in a broader range of evidence, in the end, we find it's better if it's the evidence we created, either by working with our members to build data or with our own research that we do. So, we have 50 analysts inside EIC who work to maintain 3 databases within our business that are exclusively used by our members. One is a global database for all the world's energy projects in the CapEx phase, so in the development phase. One is a global database of all the world's energy facilities. So if you like, they're existing, and then there's an OpEx or an O&M or a life extension opportunity with them. And then our third database is the supply chain companies themselves, and what capabilities they have, where they're based, what sectors they're in. So all of that combined, when you're sort of working with policymakers, it's really powerful. But in the end, though, that data is needed mainly for our members so that they understand the CapEx and the OpEx opportunities and can pursue them with maximum confidence.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's a major driver for member value.
Yeah, so our sort of slogan is export, diversify, grow. So we're trying to encourage companies to not be so domestic in their thinking, to look at the global market. We're also trying to encourage them, if they're, let's say, predominantly a renewable supply chain company, we're like, you should look at also other sectors like nuclear, maybe fusion, maybe carbon capture. And of course, ultimately, it's all about growing. So if they're not diversified and if they're not international, they're just not getting the maximum opportunity. And our data, at least in the UK, which is kind of our heritage, although we're a global business now, and we have members all over the world now, but our heritage is UK, is that companies that export broadly and effectively all over the world, they typically live longer, they pay higher salaries, they grow faster, and they're more profitable. So there's that ultimate sort of benefit of being a global business.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, building on that and talking global. So I said in intro, 120 countries. I mean, that's wild. That, a lot of associations say they're global, but it might mean they're in 3 or 4 countries. So this is truly, truly global. And so what have you learned about bringing all these countries in and still delivering value that's going to feel local and relevant to members in very likely very different markets?
We try not to cookie cut one solution that everybody has to take. I think that's the approach, right? What we try and do is we say, look, we provide you with the data and it's global, but in the end, we respect that each member has its own strategy and its own focus. And although we're like, you should be global and you should be across all industries and across all sectors, they choose. They decide what strategy they want to pursue. So we don't really have this sort of blanket approach. We leave it to them to decide, but our job is to provide them with all the information and as easy way as possible for them to cut and splice that information so they then make the best possible decision. But, 70% of our members are small to medium-sized enterprises. Obviously, they're not going to be able to do everything. They have to choose. But we're just always kind of trying to be ambitious for our members and say there is more you could do.
I love that. And I love that you give them the pathway. That's really, really fantastic. And we talk a lot on the show about how you can build that member value and give them something that they can really build their organization on. And that's exactly what you're doing. So I love hearing that. So you've also authored the annual Survive and Thrive report for years now. It studies how companies succeed during periods of disruption, which, well, we all know disruption, we know well. I'm curious, across all of that research, are there, maybe 1 or 2 leadership lessons that consistently separate those organizations that can adapt and thrive versus the ones that are going to struggle?
A little bit on Survive and Thrive. I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this topic because it's something that I started when I joined. Yeah, I've been CEO for 10 years, and when I joined, it was 2016. It was soon after the 2014 oil crisis. So a lot of our members were really not doing well. And yet, as I was introducing myself to companies, I was like, some of them had these powerful stories, amazing things they were doing, either just to survive, but it was so inspiring how they'd done it, or they were genuinely thriving, shrugging off the difficult market. And I was fascinated by this, and I wanted to know, okay, how are you doing this? So I found that most companies were very happy to share their story. They were busy, but they're like, if you can help us, we'll share our story. So I started in that first year, capturing, I think, 26 company stories. And here I am now. This is the 10th year, and we actually publish our findings in the middle of July 2026, so just a short time away. And that's 700 companies I've now interviewed over that time. And so I do get asked this question that you just asked me, Colleen, all the time, which is, you must know them. What's the best strategy and what's the best leadership approach? Oh, my word. I mean, actually, I'm going to I'll try and answer, firstly, honestly, which is I've learned that if you are a passionate leader with a good idea, then that's the right strategy and the right leadership style. I don't honestly believe, in all the time that I've been talking to business leaders and constantly inspired by the amazing things they do, there just isn't one answer. There isn't one business book. And I would always shy away from saying, follow that strategy and you will have success. Honestly, if you believe in an idea and you've got amazing energy and you know how to build a team, away you go. But I would perhaps share a couple of things I've learned, particularly in the energy sector. One is, as you kind of touched on at the start, it's constantly disrupting and changing. So firstly, you've got to love change. Honestly, if you're in the energy sector and you're hoping for a kind of stable policy in a stable geopolitical environment, maybe this isn't the sector for you. Secondly, you've got to be resilient. So you've got to really have that pick yourself up and go again the next day mentality, because, there is, I think, always going to be a new challenge literally every day. But I think finally, this is a market which is incredibly exciting and inspiring, challenging. It's technical, it's global. So it is a way to bring amazing people into your business. And so perhaps for some businesses, how do you find people and keep people is always the challenge. But in the energy sector, once you've got someone interested and inspired, then they're fully in. You know what I mean? And I think from a strategy point of view, perhaps the most important thing is to have the right people, get them inspired and keep them. And this is a sector that does that.
I love that perspective so much. I think it's so easy to just say, let me tell you what I've learned and here are the lessons, and to be able to step back and say, no, let's look at these leaders and see that it's not a one size fits all approach. And the lessons you just shared too, though, I think, you're talking about in relation to the energy industry, but I feel like those will resonate with our listeners so deeply, because I do think the people matter so much. And I love hearing that. So I think for anyone tuning in, go back and re-listen to that answer, because that was some great advice there. I've mentioned a couple times about associations and proving member value. And I mean, we're seeing here in the US, and we work with some global associations, that associations are facing higher expectations. It's just, people don't just become members of an association anymore. They want their networking, their education, advocacy, data, biz dev, everything all in one. And they want it to be valuable for them and to show them why it's valuable. So I'm really curious how you all decide where to invest so that your members can continue to see that meaningful value.
When I got this CEO job 10 years ago, my board also asked me that question, which is, we're so pleased you joined us, but to be honest, we'd like to check, what do our members want from us? So it's kind of an interesting, I thought sort of, point for me. But I realize now what a great question it was, because it changes all the time. So the way I approach that is every 3 years, I do something called double blind research, which is where I hire a third-party company to do interviews with my members, but also with my non-members, to find out what they think about EIC and our competing organizations and the things we do, our events, our advocacy, our market intelligence, and so on. But it's asked in a way which is double blind. So what that means is the company is not told it's EIC that's funded the research, and the research company itself is not told it's EIC that's doing the research. So genuinely, even though we are one of the companies mentioned in the research amongst others, nobody would know in the system that it's us funding it. So we get truly unbiased feedback about, A, how does EIC compare to its competitors? And B, what do our members want from us? Members and non-members want from us. And I would say that 3 or 4 years ago, the number one thing they wanted was market intelligence. The last time we did it, which was actually less than a year ago, it was networking, which is the number one thing they wanted. So that's an example of how things change.
That's a great example. And I love that you're actually using that to inform how you serve your members. I think it's really easy to say, hey, we're going to survey, we're going to ask, and then really easy to say, well, this is what we do best, so let's give this to them, and this is what they really want. So I think that's a great way to look at things.
And we also, you can use that data then to do your net promoter score, because obviously
Yes.
it's genuinely unbiased. It's genuinely unbiased. And so if you have the right type of question, which, seeks that kind of would you recommend type answer. So yeah, we've seen really great improving net promoter scores through that research as well.
I love that. I love that. So you've also launched initiatives like the Energy Exports Conference, the World Energy Supply Chain Awards. You have several podcast series of your own. You have global events that are new. When you think about innovation, how do you decide which ideas are worth pursuing and which ones, let's not spend our time here?
It's a little bit of, sometimes as a leader, you go with what you're most passionate about, but also of course, if you're close to your market and to your stakeholders, you get to be pretty good at situation sensing, like environment sensing, what's needed right now. Sometimes you can't actually get someone to tell you the answer, so you sort of have to work it out. And I've got a brilliant team, so I think it's a combination of those three things, right? You get to the point where you listen carefully to your stakeholders and you trust your team, and that's how we do it. But then I think you've got to go deep, right? So once you decide we're going to really commit to something, so the Energy Exports Conference, that's our flagship event every year. It's held in Aberdeen. In fact, it's coming up on the 2nd and 3rd of September 2026. That's something that I started because of the Survive and Thrive research, because the least used growth strategy, when we started, it was for every 3 years. And now this is about to launch our 10th edition. And it's still 10 years on. The least used growth strategy is, unfortunately, the development of new export markets. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you're going to develop a new international trade or export market, companies regard that as the hardest way to grow. This doesn't say that they don't export, but it says to develop a new market, a brand new country, to find people and find partners and set up accounts and take all the legal risk and finally get profit out of that decision maybe 3 to 5 years later. Companies are like, oh, that's hard. So they always find other ways to grow if they possibly can. And because of that, that's why we started the Energy Exports Conference, because it was like, okay, particularly in the UK, the supply chain is so brilliant, but they're still exporting to the same markets every time. So we decided we will bring brilliant customers to you and show you that you should be looking at these new countries and these new markets. And that's what we do. But it continues to be a hard thing, definitely a passion project, because for us also, it would be easier for us to say we're going to have a solutions conference or a diversification conference, because those are the more popular growth strategies. And the WESCAs, which sounds a bit like the Oscars, but it's just an accident, but the World Energy Supply Chain Awards, everybody wants to win a WESCA though. Yeah, that it's turned out now to be the biggest energy awards program in the world.
Wow.
But really, it's just linked to the Survive and Thrive process. So if you do the Survive and Thrive process, of which now we're running at about 130, 140 companies every year, they automatically go into the World Energy Supply Chain Awards. And yeah, of course, they get credited with a wonderful award with the strategy that they've developed. And so I think, again, it's just one of those things. Survive and Thrive is my idea. And then I had to kind of persuade the team, let's try this. And, do we know what to do with the insights? Not yet, but let's try it. And I think now here we all feel that it's a brilliant way of staying really loyal to our members, because we really promote them. It's just a free process. If you're a member, we do all this for you. You don't have to pay. And they get so much promotional benefit. And of course, they get peer approval, peer, credit. If they win an award, it's the judges who choose that, and that's their peers, so their customers ultimately. And there's no better way, I think, of deciding that you're doing a good job if you won an award that your peers have judged you should win.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think those peer recognitions are the ones that have so much meaning, because that they understand what you went through and what the journey was. So I love that. And I also just love that you take on the challenges and you take the road less traveled and then the harder path, and you're finding success there. So that's a really great story to hear. I'm going to ask you to get your crystal ball out next. And, just thinking ahead, what excites you about the future of energy, also about the future of associations? I'd be curious where you see EIC having the greatest opportunity to create value over, say, 5 or 10 years from now.
Well, in every boardroom, around every breakfast table, and certainly every policy group right now, energy is pretty much the number one topic. So I think the future needs to be to make energy more affordable. So everybody's focusing on energy abundance or on energy transition. Not enough people are focusing on, ultimately, if we can't afford the energy, then we can do all the lovely things you want, but it's going to slow down economies. So I think that's the most exciting thing that's still to be done in this incredible, sort of fast growing, I don't just mean the energy market, the economies of the world it's getting really expensive, and it's too complicated also to bring in different energy technologies that sometimes don't play nice with each other. I think that's the future, is the great innovators of the future will find the cheapest solutions to energy. And that is currently really hard to imagine when you're looking at things like nuclear and carbon capture and fusion and floating offshore wind and LNG. None of these are the cheapest. So finding a way to either apply those technologies to be cheap, or maybe there's a brand new technology just around the corner that we've not seen yet that will unlock lowest cost energy.
I'll certainly be excited to see how that turns out and what changes and just what the future holds on that front. Stuart, this has been so fantastic. I've loved this conversation. I'm so happy that we connected. Before we let you go, though, we like to end all of our podcasts with a little bit of a just for fun, rapid fire style question so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. Our first question is, what's one small thing that brings you joy lately?
I've got 9 grandchildren. So they're all under 7. So that's still pretty recent. But yeah. So 5 kids, 9 grandkids. I mean, what's not to love?
That's amazing. I love it. Okay. What are you currently obsessed with? Whether it's a book, a show, hobby, idea, you name it. Tell me what that latest obsession is.
Can I give you 2 things? One is, why do you think I said I'd love to do this podcast with you? Because I love podcasting. Oh my God, the long form conversation, the ability to learn so much from people who are brilliant leaders and communicators, the ability to super connect. I just love it. So yeah, I love doing my own podcasts. The EIC podcast, search on that and hopefully people will find something they like. But I love books. Podcasts are getting me back into the printed word somehow because they're making me appreciate the long form written text as well. Who'd have thought? So my favorite book is a book called Rendezvous with Rama. It's not very easy to say, by Arthur C. Clarke. And I mention it because one of my favorite directors, Denis Villeneuve, who did Dune, he has bought the movie rights for Rendezvous with Rama. So I'm so excited to see. This is kind of a science fiction book, and I guess I would describe myself as a dreamer. And this is one of those wonderful dreams that doesn't feel that far away anymore. So yeah, I'd suggest to anybody who loves books about the near future, try this book out.
Oh, that sounds fascinating. I'm adding that to my list. I'm a big audiobook person. My daughter just turned 5, so I think I'm getting to a point where I'll be able to start reading again and have some time, but we'll see. So right now I consume most of my long form books over the headphones, but that sounds like a good one. Okay, what's your ideal comfort food?
So I've been on a health routine quite a lot in the last 2 to 3 years. So I don't really have a comfort food. When you're like focused on trying to be good. But what I do as part of that, I stopped drinking beer completely 3 years ago. Wow. So now I live in Scotland. So occasionally I'll have a little whiskey tipple. So that's my favorite comfort. I don't really call it food, but that's what it is anyway. So just a little nice. Sounds really nice, doesn't it?
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, last one. What's a travel moment that still makes you smile when you think about it?
So, okay, can I tell you a little story? I don't know how much time we've got, but I used to live in Calgary. And when I lived in Calgary, of course, you go drive into the Rockies and you're always wanting to see wildlife, but you never know what you're going to see. And of course, there's cars pulled over on the side of the road, which is normally the clue. Pull over, there's something there. And so there was a whole bunch of cars pulled over, and I had my camera, my family in the car. And I couldn't see what it was. So I got out of the car and I started walking up the side of this hill to go and see what it was. And my kids were like, Dad, Dad, Dad. I couldn't really hear them. Anyway, so as I got up to the top of the hill and I came up to this very, thin wire fence, there was a grizzly bear. And so I had the camera in my hand and it hadn't seen me. It was eating grass or whatever it was eating. And so I just lifted up my camera very slowly. And I had one of those, this is like 20 years ago, this story. And I took a photograph, click, because the cameras back there made a click noise and the bear heard me. And as it reared up to try and frighten me off, what did I do? I took another photograph, click.
Oh my
Because I was absolutely, I cannot move. I know you shouldn't run away from a bear. And thankfully, as I did that, it ran off. And I had this incredible photograph of a rearing, huge grizzly bear. Not the greatest thing to do. This is the story I now tell in a lot more detail if I'm doing like health and safety briefings to my team. I'm like, here's what you should not do. But it still makes me smile anyway.
That's wild. What a cool story. Well, Stuart, thank you again. I just appreciate your time and for how much you've shared with us today. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Colleen. Lovely to talk to you too. And keep up the great work.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. The Association Insights podcast, powered by OnWrd and UpWrd, is a production of OnWrd and UpWrd Marketing and Communications, where our mission is to make associations and nonprofits the go-to source in their industries through earned media and thought leadership. This podcast is an extension of our newsletter, a weekly collection of best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies delivered straight to your inbox. Have you undertaken a big change at your association? Or do you have some words of wisdom from the trenches of association life? Well, we want to hear from you, and so do our listeners. Drop us a note at info@onwardupwrd.com. That's info@onwrdupwrd.com. Be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and share with your friends and colleagues. We're available anywhere podcasts are found. Come back next week for more association inspiration and insights. Thanks for tuning in.